Hi, everybody. I'm waiting until a few people show up, and because I have a lot of stuff to cover today. So let's see if you're showing up. And you may hear some noise behind you. That's because we have major Santa Ana winds. So if the roof disappears, then you know why and where it went. Okay. It is that time. So there is the first person. Hi, Fala. Uh, and there's Marge. Hey, Marge. Haven't seen you for ages. Good to see you. So let me start. This is going to be recorded anyway. Hey, Terry. It's going to be recorded, so you're going to have access to it anytime in the future. So I can start now. So I'm going to go and try to take it a little bit slower than in my previous lecture or previous webinar where I was a little bit fast. So lots of questions to cover, and I don't know if I will have any time for additional material that I wanted to talk about. And we may run over a little bit, but that's okay. So the first question was from Susan Hartman. She is a kidney donor. Oh, she donated one of her kidneys, and thank you for doing that. That is an amazing thing. And so her question is that given that she has only one kidney, should she make any adjustment in protein or sodium? And I think this is a great question because a lot of times you can hear that salt is bad for you, protein is bad for the kidneys. In fact, we just now have a post in the group, somebody asking just that. And none of that has shown to be true. So there have been a lot of guesses all over the place. There are good research studies, bad research studies, and so we can't really come up to the correct answers all the time, but in some cases we can. The kidney is responsible for electrolyte creation, and so its job is to know how much sodium and how much potassium to keep, to retain, or to excrete. So if you're eating too much sodium, no problem. It's just simply going to excrete the excess. So that's what it does. If you're eating too little, it will probably excrete some of your potassium because what it needs to do is keep the two in balance so that your electrolyte is just fine. So the kidney can manage that. It doesn't matter if you have one or if you have two. Rather, the more important thing, given that you only have one, is to maintain hydration permanently all the time. That is more important. In terms of protein, the only reason why they are mentioning that protein is not good for your kidneys is because of the uric acid that is a protein byproduct. However, studies have shown, and I just listened to a podcast by Dr. Jason Fung discussing the exact same thing. And he was saying that no studies have ever been able to show this to be true. And they have tested this on a couple of studies with healthy and also with sick people. So it doesn't appear to be true. There is probably a different exit avenue from protein than it is from, for example, drinking alcohol or doing other things that may, in fact, contribute to trouble of your kidneys. Now the next question is from Chrissy Dasher, and I'm sorry if I pronounced somebody's name the wrong way. Her question is a very good one. She says that besides taking magnesium internally, meaning the magnesium supplement, what other ways are great for absorption, such as magnesium bath, spray, or cream? This is something that I've talked about before, but I'm bringing it up again because I think maybe a live conversation is a little bit better about it. When you're talking about minerals that our body needs, every single mineral for the body is only usable because it is an ion. So let me backtrack on this. What is an ion? The ion, think of magnesium, it's a molecule, right? You buy a pill and it has white powder and that's magnesium. When you're looking at magnesium like that, that is not in an ionic form. Ion means that it is electrically imbalanced. So it has some sort of a polar charge. So if magnesium that you buy in a pill form had a polar charge, you couldn't get a hold of it, or couldn't touch it, or couldn't let go of it. the point is that when it is in any form that you can buy, be it in a cream or a bottle or spray or powder, it is not electrically charged. It is not in an ionic form, so it doesn't absorb. We have a skin, right? Our skin is a protective barrier specifically to not have these things come through our skin. When you take the magnesium in a form of powder or pill or liquid or any form that you're taking it, our body changes it into an ionic form. That is what our body does. Everything that we eat, including salt, that is one of the reasons why we're talking about sodium all the time, because salt doesn't stay salt in the body. It immediately, in your mouth, converts into sodium and chloride ions. Magnesium, too, it will immediately separate from the other parts, and the elemental form of the magnesium will, once again, will become an ion, and then it can enter into the cells, because minerals cannot just randomly enter into any cell. We have ionic channels. They're all gated with the exception of water, and perhaps some other smaller ions can go through, such as potassium can sometimes go through on some other channels than potassium channels, but nearly every single channel we have, and a channel is, think of it as a door of the cell. So anything that goes into the cell has to pass through this ionic gate, this door. And it can't go through unless it has the correct ionic charge. And when you get a magnesium spray, it has no charge, so it cannot go in. There's also an FDA regulation that if you are selling anything over the counter as a supplement, not as a prescription medicine, but as a supplement, it cannot possibly cross the skin barrier. So you know that any of these sprays, bath, whatever, they may feel good because partly probably placebo effect. If it's a bath, it's a one bath, it's lovely, but it doesn't actually cross into the skin. The only thing that can cross into the skin is water. And if you're in a salt water, now water is a little bit, it has a little bit of a charge. It is not neutral. It is the oxygen is very weakly bound to hydrogen. So water can in fact cross your skin. And that is why if you stay in the skin for a long time, you're gonna end up with wrinkled skin, like the kids coming out of the pool after a long time, they all look wrinkled up. That's partly because the water crossed and washed out your electrolytes from the cells, okay? Another question from Chrissy Dasher is, what are my thoughts on functional medicine? Now, some of you know I have enrolled, I got accepted and enrolled in functional medicine school, I think a little over a year ago, something like that. And I started, and the very first week of my lectures, what were my lectures? How to make money on supplements. And I really became totally disenchanted with the entire field, that every single video, every single lecturer, whoever it was, every single one of them was just talking about supplements, selling supplements, how to make money on blood tests. And this included Dr. Hyman, many of you know him, also included a lot of other big names. I don't want to name everyone. I was extremely turned off by it. I still have the books and I can refer to the books. Some information from the books is pretty good, but in general, functional medicine to me is pretty much a bunch of quackery. This doesn't mean that all doctors who practice functional medicine are quacks. No, it doesn't mean that. Many of the doctors pick up functional medicine in addition to whatever field they do. Many chiropractors pick up functional medicine. They probably have fantastic chiropractic practice. I'm not questioning that. But I would never go to a chiropractor for my functional medicine needs, because I don't think that, first of all, they are not medically trained. All the classes I took so far didn't have a single medical connection whatsoever. I don't recommend functional medicines, and I had the same problem with naturopath. In some states, naturopaths are illegal, and they can't call themselves doctors in most states. Many of them do call themselves doctors until they get caught and then they're fined and blah, blah. They're not trained in medicine the same way as a medical doctor is. I'm not saying that traditional Western medicine is all that great, but at least there is some trust that we can have in the traditional Western medicine in some ways. And the same with Eastern medicine, by the way. Eastern medicine has been alive for I don't know how many thousands of years longer than Western medicine. So in some ways it is more trustable. My problem with Eastern medicine is a combination of the Western and Eastern in that they can overdose because they possibly can do the same thing and we don't know because they have never been tested. We do know of many interactions with Eastern medicine or with Western. Now, the next question is from Barb Champer, and she had a lot of questions, so I'm going to cover them as much as I can. So she's been on the protocol for a long time, and she's struggling with the sodium of how much, and and she still wakes up at like cramps at night. And since a lot of you have also asked similar questions about salt, I decided to address this. We have several documents under files that you can look up about the salt need, and you can also search the group, and you can see that most of us, if not all of us, end up taking much more salt than what we start with. So the original starting protocol is 2 to 1.75 potassium to sodium ratio, but that's just your food. That doesn't include the salt tablets or 1 teaspoon of salt that you take during the day when you're not eating. So that's just the salt. What we find that most people actually end up at 1-to-1 ratio. It is a better ratio for most of us. We just need a lot more salt. And if you recall from the book, there was a study I referred to from 1951 in which they showed that migraineurs excrete 50% more sodium in the urine than other people. 50% more. So just remember that. And that was in 1951 when people in general ate a lot more salt than they do now. So just keep on experimenting. We have salt tests, try it out and see what is happening. She's also asking, do most people use 5,000 milligrams sodium or more? Yes, actually, if you look back, I posted a little article under files just recently with several links to articles that actually show studies that show that 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams sodium is actually the preferred non-migraineur sodium zone. So if a non-migraineur does best in terms of cardiovascular disease and health in general, if they do best with 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams sodium, and migraineurs excrete 50% more. So what does that tell you? That tells you that an ideal situation for a migraineur is probably around 7,500 to 8,000 milligrams sodium. So think about that, experiment, everybody, increase your sodium according to what your body will tell you to take, okay? Then she's asking, is it good to have some water without salt? No, absolutely not. It is good at the beginning when you're starting out. And that's because your body has to get used to the change. Electrolyte change is important to get used to for your kidneys, for your heart as well, because your blood volume will increase. And if you have any form of atherosclerosis, something I will be talking about momentarily, then increased blood volume will have a chance to increase your blood pressure. And so some people within the group, only a handful, maybe even less, have that situation going on. So if that is the case, if that is your case, that you have atherosclerosis and your blood pressure increases, then we will need to reevaluate. You will have to go and get a coronary artery calcium scan, because we want to know what level of atherosclerosis you have. We also want to re-examine why you have it. Is it something that we can work on or we can't work on? So we need to know more. But in general, for those of us who are healthy, don't have high blood pressure, which 99% of us don't have high blood pressure, and we don't show any increase of blood pressure from salt. I wish I did. My average blood pressure is around 100/60. A high blood pressure for me is 110/70. So no, we don't, and I eat a lot of salt. and no, we don't increase our blood pressure. So I would not want to eat or drink a glass of water without salt, because then I'm diluting the amount of salt I have in my electrolytes, and I'm actually weakening my position against migraines. So that's not a good idea. And this, by the way, doesn't mean that for those of you who start and we tell you to take a salt serving with every second glass, do that, and then slowly increase as your body needs it. Okay. Does the extra amount stay the same? Pretty much, unless there are weather changes, stress, prodromes, etc. My experience is that my sodium need changes every single day. It is completely dependent upon my weather, what I eat, how much I eat, how active I am, what I'm doing, and what my health is. If I am sick, I will need to have more salt, no matter what health condition I have. So it changes all the time. You can't go by any kind of a random number and say, okay, I'm going to have that much salt every single day. No, you have to keep on changing as you go. Okay, and that also goes for the water. You have to meet your minimum water every day. That doesn't mean you should get stuck there. If some days you need more, have more. Just don't have less. And how do you know if you're having too much salt? So too much salt means that your cells are completely full and they cannot accept in more water. So your cells are full, you don't have enough potassium in the system, so your exchange is not happening. If your exchange is not happening, the water just stays where it's at. No matter how much extra water you drink, nothing is moving, nothing is changing. So when you have too much salt, you will find that your urine color is going to become pale. So how can you tell the difference between having too much or too little salt? Because both end up with pale urine. And if you page up in the book, I'm discussing all kinds of tests for this. We have finger tests, we have lists. So take a look. These are all explained in the book. And then the final question from her, I was a little bit confused about the question. She's saying that the salt capsules have 360 milligrams sodium, and the teaspoon, we say 1/8, which is a little bit smaller, the 300 milligram teaspoon. And the pill that she's taking is 280 milligram. I don't know why. And she decided to taking 2/8 teaspoon, which is 1/4 of a teaspoon at a time. I don't think that that's a good idea, Barb. You need to really stick with 1/8 teaspoon salt per 8-ounce water. So those of us who take pills like the Health Web Principle capsules that are 360 milligrams sodium, we either compensate for it or we know that that is what we need per glass of water. So in my case, that is what I need per glass of water. Okay. So let me go now to Pascal. Pascal had a very interesting question. Actually several questions that interrelate, and this is applicable for those of you in the protocol group who are in ketosis, which by now I know many of you are in ketosis, and some are in fact actively pursuing ketosis with or without ketogenic diet. Carnivore diet, for example, is a ketosis inducing diet without the ketogenic diet being included. So one of her questions is that if the idea is to empty the glycogen stores, so we can start using fat for energy, then could fasting or 2 days achieve that, or how long? So let me say this, and this is why I didn't put this only into the keto group, and when I want to talk about it, we don't ever empty our glycogen stores, okay? The glycogen stores are there forever. You don't want to get rid of them. What we're doing is we start moving it, meaning we're replacing it and refilling it, replacing and refill. We have on average about, I think it was 100 gram stored glycogen in our liver and about 300 to 400 in our muscles. So at most we can have about 2,000 calories worth of stored glycogen. We must have stored glycogen all the time because there are some organs, for example, our blood, red blood cells, must have glucose because they don't have mitochondria. So organs that have no mitochondria must use glucose for their energy. So we will never be able to empty. The moment we reduce our glycogen stores in both our muscles and in the liver, particularly in the liver, it is going to recover immediately because that is what it's supposed to do. The question is whether you need to use the glycogen that you have available. That's a different question. So if you're doing a proper ketogenic or carnivore or whatever diet, if your ketosis is a good one, that means you're using your fat even if your glycogen storage is full. That's what it means. So the goal and the aim is not to empty your glycogen store, but to stop using the glycogen store. So if you're still using it, that means if you're still using it for things other than red blood cells and your eyes and whatever other miniature little organs need glucose all the time, if you still need it, then you're not properly in ketosis. So then also, we need to understand that the body has two fuels. Let me explain what this means. So we have three macronutrients. We have carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Of these three, we only have two that provide us with fuel for energy, okay? Protein is not one of them. Protein, our whole body is protein. Your skin is protein. Your hormones are protein. Insulin is a protein. Everything that you have in your body is made practically of protein. Protein is not ever going to be used for energy. We are doing a protein diet in the carnivore for a different reason. And it's not to provide you with energy. It is to allow your body to recover, cell replacement, repair, that kind of stuff, which is continuous, it's constant. The other two elements, which would be carbohydrates and fat, both are fuels. If you eat them both at the same time, the body can only use one of the two and the other one will be stored. This is where the problems are coming in. So if you are on a standard American SAD diet, right? We all know that you're eating both a lot of fat and also a lot of carbohydrates. And it also matters what kind of carbohydrates. Obviously, if you're putting some olive oil on your salad dressing, that's not going to be nearly olive oil on your salad as dressing. It's not going to be nearly as bad for you as if you were eating a cake with a cherry on top, right? So we're not talking about the same kind of things. So consider what happens when you have both fuels available. So you're eating, just going to give an example. You're eating an apple, which is a high carbohydrate fruit, which we consider to be healthy, or not we, but other people. And you're eating that with whipped cream, okay? Whipped cream is a pretty heavy fat item. So what happens between the two? You eat the apple and you're eating also the whipped cream. What fuel is going to be used? So if you're looking at the two fuels, you basically have too much fuel now, and your body can only use one. The one that it must use if you eat the apple is going to be the apple. Why? And that is going to be because the apple will convert into glucose. Glucose is toxic to the body, to the blood. At max, we only have 1 teaspoon of blood glucose in our entire blood, given a healthy status. And there's a little bit of variation, but the variation in terms of teaspoon is minimal. But when you eat that apple, that typically has a small apple, a Granny Smith, which is not even sweet, has about 16 carb grams, half of which is fructose. So even though part of that will convert to glucose, I ignore. So 8 grams of carbs, that is 2 teaspoons of glucose you're eating with that apple. That is twice as much as you already have in your blood. So when you ate that apple, you tripled the amount of glucose. And glucose is all fuel for energy. So here you go. You now have a ton of energy that you really should be running around the circle as long as you burn out, because that's what glucose is for. It is energy for running, activity, exercise, whatever. You're not running. Why aren't you running? So the problem then is what is going to happen to the fat from the whipped cream that you're eating with the apple? That's a problem because you just used a bunch of glucose for your energy. So what is going to happen to the fat? the fat is going to be stored. And in addition to that, given how much extra glucose the apple has, and the body can't use that much energy unless, of course, you exercise immediately or while you're eating, which is not likely that you will be doing, it has to store that energy. So your body will take a little bit of energy out of the apple as glucose, will use it right away, and all the rest of it is going to go through, when it goes through a process called pyruvate, and I talk about this in the group quite often, there's a process where the pyruvate doesn't go into the mitochondria for energy, but goes and converts into lactate. Lactate then shuts down the burning of this excess glucose, and it converts it immediately to triglycerides. This is why eating carbs causes triglycerides. But if you're eating carbs and fat together, you're going to have a lot of energy put on hold and put into storage. And so having too much energy is not a good way to go. So when you're talking about emptying the glycogen storage and eating a lot of fat, it's a little bit confused there, because the glycogen storage needs to remain for those organs and only those organs that need the glycogen, and then your body should be using fat. The problem comes in with your next question, where it says, would it not be logical to provide a high-fat diet when refeeding to force the liver to use fat for energy? So first of all, the liver is not going to be using fat for energy. The liver is the machine that puts things into storage or takes them out. It is the rest of our body that will use either fat or glucose for energy. And we can't force the liver to do anything. The liver has a natural switch, I should say. Our pancreas and liver work in harmony, and we have a natural switch. And the switch apparently happens at 80 milligram per deciliter blood glucose, which is 4.4 millimole per liter. Okay, so when you reach that level of glucose in your blood, there's supposed to be a switch turning on, which should activate in the pancreas the anti-insulin hormone called glucagon. Glucagon is the one that is supposed to encourage or tell the liver, it's time to switch now to make more glycogen, yes, more glycogen, as well as try to make ketones so that the body has fuel. Therefore, for those of us who are metabolically healthy, this 80 milligram per deciliter or 4.4 millimole per liter is a magic number. The problem is that people who are metabolically not healthy, it is not at 80. If you have diabetes, it may be at 110 milligram per deciliter, which is something like 6 millimole per liter or maybe higher. So this number keeps on changing based on your metabolic health. So that is why when you are, for example, completely diabetic or have insulin resistance and your blood glucose is still over 100 and you may feel hungry, and what that signals is that your body has a lot of fuel in it. It has a lot of glucose. It's not able to use it because the insulin is resistant, and the cells that would need to put up the hand for as an insulin receptor, hello insulin, I want the glucose, they're not going to put it out because they're full of glucose. And so that's basically what insulin resistance means. The cells are full of glucose. Insulin cannot deliver glucose to the cells. You can't force the body anymore to put more glucose into the cells. So your organs, some of them start feeling starved because they're not having enough fuel. And when they are starved, ketosis will kick in. This is when you get the runaway ketones. So I think we talked enough about this kind of a diet. The one thing that I wanted to talk about is a carnivore and zero carb diet and how that fits into ketosis. So when you are starting carnivore or zero carb diet, many of you complain of fatigue. You don't have any energy. You may get a headache. You don't feel good. You may get diarrhea or constipation, some of you. And that is completely logical. Think of it this way. If your body has insulin resistance and it needs a lot of insulin to get glucose into the cells, and suddenly you're not eating glucose, but your body doesn't know how to create ketones or how to use ketones or whatever you've created, then it will have no energy. You can eat protein 10 pounds a day. You will not get energy. Protein is not an energy food. Protein is to fill your tummy, yes, but it also provides, like I said, recovery for the cells, repair. Very small part of protein is actually possible to be used as energy. And that will be what Pascal referred to, that over 50% of protein becomes glucose. And so that's going to be glucose that we use. No. So if you're on the carbohydrate-based diet, most of the protein indeed will convert into glucose. The non-essential amino acids, in fact, do convert into glucose. The essential fatty acids, amino acids within protein, has usually options of either functioning as a glucose or as a ketone, and two of our essential amino acids can only work as ketones. So when you're talking about the proper diet for carnivore diet, and this is one of the reasons why we encourage people to eat beef, lamb, fish, particularly salmon, rather than chicken, is because if you look at, I have an article I wrote on protein, and I've created a table in that. Look under hormonesmatter.com. And in that table, I show comparison of the different kind of amino acid compositions per different types of foods. And I also included in this one vegan foods such as tofu and beans and lettuce and tomato, just to show that the protein quality, which I defined as essential amino acid divided by the non-essential amino acid, what percentage of the amino acids in the protein are essential versus non-essential. And you're going to find that some of the foods have extremely low quality protein in them. For example, rice and soy are equally bad. So they're really not high protein qualities. The highest protein quality came from salmon. The next one was, I believe, lamb, eggs, milk, and beef. These were the ones that had really good quality. I think they were 93% of the ratio that it came out to be. So it was fantastic. Chicken just came out at 86%, so it wasn't that good. So you need to look at, and I believe rice was something like 70% or 69, and soy was then 70%, something like that. Even romaine lettuce had better protein structure in terms of amino acids than some of the other foods. So when you're eating the right kind of protein, you will have a chance to generate more ketones instead of glucose. And whatever glucose that you do generate, if you eat a lot of protein, some of that glucose will be stored as triglycerides in your body, and from there, or glycogen in your body, either in the liver or in the muscle or both. And then from there, from that, you can gain some energy. But that is really very minimal, and protein is not for energy in general. So let's see where we are in time. We're doing good. So the next question is from Elisa Romeo, and she had a variety of questions here. She was watching something called Forks Over Knives. It's a documentary which discusses the link between red meat and dairy. So she's asking, is there any reason to be concerned? Fantastic question. No, there is absolutely no reason to be concerned. So think back into human evolution. For those who believe in evolution, which I happen to be one, you can't help but to wonder, how did we survive our era of eating only red meat? So when you go back in times, why are we here if they cause cancer and harmful for us? Go back to milk. If our babies are nursing, is that causing them cancer? No, obviously there is something both in dairy as well. Well, let me refer dairy to milk, because the others are processed. But say milk and red meat. If you consider these two, these have been the human staple. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years. I mean, from the point where humans were considered to be Homo anything, Homo sapiens or Homo whatever, those were times when humans were consuming red meat primarily. And most of the animals that humans ate, not all, but most of them would have been ruminants, and that's red meat. There were no domesticated animals for a long time, so the easiest animals to catch would have been ruminants, maybe some rodents and other kind of things, and I don't know what kind of meat they have. But that is what we are used to, so why would they cause cancer? Now, with all this said and done, if you eat processed red meats, sausages, even all bacon is not red meat, so I'm not going to consider that, and it's not really processed to the same degree. But if you buy salami, sausages, that kind of things, or if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of grains and a lot of starches together with a lot of saturated fatty meats that are red meat, white meat, any kind of meat, you will have trouble, because we already know that if you're combining high amounts of fat, be it saturated, unsaturated, any kind of fat, with high amounts of carbohydrates, be it any kind of carbohydrates, you will have trouble, because now you have too much energy source, right? I just explained that there's two fuel sources, and so they will be stored. And the problem with storing fuel in terms of the glucose, and the problem of converting so much carbohydrate, is that oxidation. It's called reactive oxygen species, or ROS, or free radicals. They're pretty much the same thing. And you probably know enough about free radicals that is why we are eating foods with antioxidants when we are eating a diet high in carbohydrates, because antioxidants are required to remove the free radicals. Free radicals are oxidized foods. So I'm going to show this again, but I wanted to show you this. I brought it up. Here is a little watering tool, right? So you see nothing. It's some kind of a metal, right? I wanted to show you what oxidation does. So you can see that over there? That? And look at it from this, I don't know if you can see it from the side, that it actually has a texture. So you can see it's sort of kind of bumpy. And so this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about free radicals, reactive oxygen species, okay? This is also called common rust. So if you take anything that is made of, those of you who have cast iron cookingware like I do, if you put it down on the surface with a little water on it, within 5 minutes, rust shows up. Oxidation simply means that you have a free arm and a free ion, where things can, when oxygen can grab a hold of that particular thing, and it can basically oxidize it and damage it. So if you're eating foods in the wrong way and combine fats and combine carbohydrates in large amounts, yep, I'm sure you're going to get cancer, but it's not going to be from red meat. It's going to be probably from the combination of the red meats and the carbohydrates, or the kind of red meats. And if you're eating dairy, where there are a lot of cheeses, which we all love, you have to consider what kind of processing they went through. So if you're buying a lot of organic stuff that was not artificially heated, melted, God knows what, you're probably safe, okay? Now then, a question from Margaret, and I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Grisdow, I guess, with respect to the best foods to eat at 4 a.m. for the down effect. Well, what is a down effect? The down effect is actually the release of cortisol and other kind of stress hormones, which back glucose up. So you have a lot of glucose. Why would you want to eat for the down effect? The best thing you can do for the down effect is to not eat. Now, if you wake up, and the down effect, by the way, is usually between 4 and 7 a.m., depending, sort of kind of varies per person. If you're metabolically healthy, the down effect is not really going to increase your blood glucose, or not noticeably so. It will still back it up, but it's not going to be noticeable. It's just going to be a little bit. If you're metabolically unhealthy, it will back it up a little bit more. And the only time you may consider doing anything is if you wake up with a sugar crash, but then you don't necessarily want to eat. So depending upon, obviously, the time of the day, if it's like 5 a.m. and you wake up with a sugar crash, yes, you may want to eat a bite of meat. not much, a couple of bites, just to assuage your body and get it in to working, because you don't want to do exercises. Normally, what we do when you have a backed up blood glucose is what? You exercise, because you actually want your body to kick in the process that allows it to use up all the glucose that backed up and start working properly. So you don't want to eat. The moment you eat, you're causing more insulin release, and so you don't want to do that. And the last question before I'm answering a big question from Chuck, this is from Joycelyn Dean Sass. She says, could you address the question of edema as it relates to too much, not enough water, too much, not enough salt? Are there other factors as well, not including carbs? I'm not quite sure if I answered your question when I talked about how to tell whether we have too much or too little salt. But I think you need to know that edema is very specific to water being collected in extracellular space. So it's not inside the cells, and the salt are inside the cells. So, or sodium, that is. Or at least in interstitial space, which is immediately surrounding the cell. It's not in extracellular space. So edema is in a different space. It is not caused by anything other than something removing water from your cells and putting it into extracellular space. And from our knowledge, we by now know it is usually associated with carbohydrates. And this is all written up in the comprehensive guide as well as in the book. So I recommend that you study up on that a little bit. So Truck had a very big question, and I decided to spend most of my time that is left on that question. And I have even printed out some pictures so I can talk about it. So her question was this, okay? Can you talk about the connection between heated oils and atherosclerosis? Okay, so this is a fantastic question, because I always keep on telling you to not eat vegetable oils at all and not use them for anything. And then whatever oil that you do eat, such as olive or avocado or coconut oil, which are not vegetable but actually fruit oils. I think coconut is fruit, I don't know. To not heat it, because they will be oxidized. And the oxidation is because of the smoke point. So once you reach a certain temperature, which for some of these is pretty low, they oxidize. So I will explain oxidation a little bit more. I just showed you a picture of what it looks like, but I just want you to know what happens to oils that are heated. And these oils, particularly vegetable oils and seed oils, these come to us already oxidized, because in the manufacturing process, they're not using cold press process like a very good quality olive oil or avocado oil will come to you as cold pressed, and also coconut oil. Those will come to you as cold pressed, meaning that was not used in the processing of those oils. So those oils out of the bottle are safe to eat cold as they are. If you get a bottle of vegetable oils or cottonseed oil, rapeseed oil, whatever they might be, sunflower oil, those oils are not safe to put on your salad either. So when you go to a restaurant and they give you a choice of salad dressings, blue cheese, whatever, chances are some of those dressings will have these kind of vegetable oils in them. And much of the food that you eat in restaurants, if it's cooked in oil, most likely it will be cooked in soy oil or something like this. And so these oils are extremely bad for us, because in the process of making them, they use extreme heat. And so what happens to oil when you apply heat? And I'm going to read this because I copied this out of an article. Oils that heat start to form aldehydes. Aldehyde is a toxin. So you're familiar with those. We use aldehydes for many things in biology, including some form of aldehydes that are used to store dead animals for life. I'm not sure that I would like to be that way. I would like to eat that liquid. It oxidizes. It also goes through polymerization and hydrolysis, or hydrolysis, however you're going to pronounce that. So it changes its structure completely, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And in general, these are chemical reactions that our body naturally would not go through and would not put any food elements that we eat put through, except for oxidation, which I'm going to talk about. And because these are inflammatory elements, if you remember what atherosclerosis is, it is actually inflammation. So I have a couple of drawings here, and one of them on the top, I don't think you can see, the very top, that one. This would be a picture of an artery. So you can see the inside, the very center, surrounded by the black circle. That is where the blood flows. That's called the lumen. Okay, that is the central lumen. The black area or dark circle around it, let's see if I can find that. There's a little dark circle around it inside. That would be the endothelium. That is a layer of cells, which in fact are very critical what is happening to our entire artery. And the rest of them, by and large, as you see this orange circle around and different layers, that is actually a smooth muscle. So our artery and blood vessels actually are muscles. And so that is why you can have, for example, if you drink a cup of coffee, it's going to constrict your blood vessels all over your body. Artery is just a form of blood vessel. I should say all blood vessels are basically arteries, just a different size and different location, and the pressure is different between them. But basically, when you drink a cup of coffee or take a triptan or something like that, your entire vessel system is going to constrict. It's called vasoconstriction. And so it's one ginormous muscle. It's a smooth muscle, meaning it's not like meat muscles where you have fibers, but it's a smooth muscle like the heart. So the entire thing contracts at the same time. The problem occurs when you're looking at the actual lumen where the blood flows. And I have another picture here that's on the bottom. Okay, so here's the endothelium layer, and inside, you saw earlier, this is where the blood actually flows, right? And so here's the endothelium, and then after that is the muscles and all kinds of layers. The problem happens right here. I don't know if you can read that. Is glycocalyx. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Glycocalyx is the glycocalyx. Think of it as little hairs right there. And when you're looking at these little hairs, you can also see in them, there's, for example, LDLs. So you can see the little cholesterols. There are also platelets. And there are other kind of things that come out of your blood and can pass through the endothelium. So the endothelium is a very, very thin layer of cells. And these cells is just a one layer. It's very, very thin. And the cells are connected, but there's a little bit of space in between them as well. Now, the glycocalyx that I showed you, the little hairs, they are extremely important because they are also polar, and they have different tricks and gimmicks by which they can capture elements and either help them to go through the endothelium when they have to, or they can literally stop the process from going through the endothelium, and they can also pass the products through the endothelium such that the endothelium doesn't actually engulf and eat it, because endothelium is a cell, so it can in fact eat something, obviously, so it could engulf as well. But so look at cholesterol. So when LDL is coming from the blood, you eat and it's in your blood. So what happens next? It wants to go somewhere, right? In general, every single cell in our body needs cholesterol. Cholesterol is a structural building block of the cells together with fats, so and carbon, so they set up the cell all the way around us. Cholesterol is also fuel. It also generates hormones and other kind of things. So cholesterol is a very important element. So it will have to be in one way or another entering into every single cell. So every single cell in our body is equipped to allow cholesterol to come in via receptors and different kind of things. So what happens when the system goes out of order? Why would the system go out of order? So add to the mix that we just had oxidized fats and oxidized LDL. LDL is not a cholesterol in itself. LDL is a lipoprotein ball, which is basically a triglycerides inside, as well as proteins, as well as cholesterol inside. It's basically a protein ball. And it also carries, in addition to cholesterol and triglycerides, it carries all your fat-soluble vitamins and minerals. So LDL will carry your calcium, vitamin D, K, A, and probably a whole lot of other things that I don't remember. So LDL is not a bad thing. What is a bad thing if the LDL gets modified? So when would an LDL get modified? An LDL will oxidize in the process of glycation. Glycation, as the name implies, something to do with glucose, and is oxidizing. And so the process is very complicated, so I don't want to get into it. But when you're glycating LDL, where is the thing? Here, on that side. This is what you're facing, right? So that would be what it would look like. A regular LDL would look like this, and this is the oxidized LDL. So when you're looking at that, what does that tell you right away? It looks different. It behaves different. The body doesn't recognize it as an LDL, so it will react to it differently. So everything will be different about LDL that has oxidized cholesterol in it or oxidized fat in it. Now, fat and cholesterol are not the same, but they are sort of kind of together because triglycerides are fat and they're within the cholesterol. So we kind of group them together. That is why you get your blood test, cholesterol lipid test. It's called lipid test, even though cholesterol is not a lipid and fat is not a cholesterol, but they kind of group them together because they travel together. They sort of kind of go together. So when you're looking at the oxidized cholesterol or oxidized fat, it's pretty much the same idea in that they are damaged and the body will attack them as it attacks anything that is a pathogen. So your body is looking at these oxidized elements and it's going to say, these are pathogens. This is not something that we want to deal with. And it will unleash an attack using macrophages. Macrophages are the little bacteria that, a little immune cell that I envision, bacteria that eat things up, okay? So macrophages are then on the scene, and as cholesterol is crossing into the cell walls, as it should, all cholesterol should, some of them are oxidized and bad cholesterol, but they're crossing anyway. Macrophages head to the scene because these aren't supposed to be there. These are not LDLs of the proper, not the cholesterol of the proper kind. And so macrophages are attacking and will consume at least some of these LDLs, but not all. These are different. They're not bacteria. So we're talking about fats and LDLs or cholesterol that are oxidized and sticky and ooey and gooey, and they are not really made to function well. So even macrophages are going to have a hard time. So it's just going to pile and pile and pile up. And I don't have a picture of this, but you can look at the picture of this on the article that I just recently wrote on Hormones Matter about statins. Scroll down to the bottom, and the very last picture, I'm showing you what actually becomes what I call a pimple in the artery. So it is in the wall between the endothelium and the muscle, the smooth muscle that I just showed you. There's a little space. That is where the trouble is going to happen. It's not inside the artery, and it is not outside of the artery. It is in between the wall of the two walls. And it sort of kind of builds up as a huge pile of dead macrophages, that cholesterol, dead or oxidized cholesterol, oxidized fat is going to build up. And because it becomes an unstable area, also calcium is going to be heading to that area. And so this particular pimple is going to keep on growing and growing and growing because the body always sees it as something that it shouldn't be there. So it becomes what we call a plaque. It really isn't a plaque. It doesn't look like something is built on the inside of the wall of your artery, or it's not on the inside. There's going to be no yellow smooshes. They show it to you in drawings all over Google. If you search for it, it's not inside where the blood is flowing. It is actually on one layer outside. Here's the blood flowing, here's the endothelium, and it's just outside of that. That is where the problem is, except it's bulging. So if you consider your artery, think of it as a, for example, hose from your garden that you use to water your garden, and you suddenly push your finger in on one side, and it causes a little bit of a bump on the inside of the water hose is going to increase the pressure of the water going through in that spot. So at that spot, then it increases the blood pressure in your artery. When the blood pressure increases, that means that whatever is in your blood, red blood cells, other kind of things, particular red blood cells, increase in speed, and it keeps on hitting the same spot all the time. And when it keeps on hitting the same spot all the time, it causes more damage. It's going to tear the place. It's going to cause additional problems. So the body keeps on having to repair that area. So the atherosclerosis, the inflammation, is this. It's the working of your immune system to try to protect your wall, your arteries. It isn't caused by the food that it deposits anywhere or anything like that. No, it is actually your body's immune response to the foods that you're eating. This is why eating grains, eating sugar, eating alcohol, juices, whatever, all these can cause atherosclerosis without having any fat in them, because it's basically an immune response. So once you understand that atherosclerosis is an immune response, and also understand that the increased blood pressure comes second to the atherosclerosis. I had a big argument with somebody on Twitter now for about a week. We finally gave up discussing this, who kept on telling me that first comes the high blood pressure and then the atherosclerosis. I said, that is not possible. You need to constrict the blood vessel in order for the pressure to increase, given the same amount of blood all the time in your arteries, right? So you need to understand that atherosclerosis can be caused by anything that the body is going to launch an immune attack against. So when you're talking about oxidized stuff, that will always happen. So let me explain what oxidation is. And we have only 4 minutes left, so that's actually a pretty good time. So you have seen a variety of posts from me about different kind of fats, oils, and other kind of things. So we have 3 types of fats, 4, but let me just talk about the 3 in general. We have monounsaturated fatty acids, such as, for example, olive oil. We have polyunsaturated fatty acids, just the vegetable oils, and saturated fatty acids, which are the animal fats, right? Saturated one is totally saturated, meaning that every single molecule that is connecting is tied down. So there's no arm pulled up that, hello, I'm still have an electron charge and I can take on an oxygen, hydrogen, or something to be saturated. There's none, because every single one is closed completely. That's saturation. When you're talking about monounsaturated, then that means that there's one bond where there is one finger pointing up to be saturated. This one can cause trouble, and that is why we recommend you don't use it for cooking. It is also one of the reasons why it is no longer solid. When you're looking at fat molecules, those that are saturated are totally straight. And all the bonds are tied and it's totally straight, and so they pack down. They remain completely solid, other than when you heat them up or at room temperature. For example, they may still remain solid. Like I contain bacon drippings is solid at room temperature. But if I touch them, my body temperature, they're no longer solid. Oils, such as olive oil, for example, will have this one unsaturated molecule, which means that it can pack differently. It's bent. So instead of having them totally flat, they're bent, but they're all bent in the same place. It's always at the exact same molecule within the molecular structure, the exact same point where this one finger will point up, that it can still retain hydrogen and or oxygen in the case of oxidation. So because they're all the same shape, they still can pile on each other and they still can form, but it's a semi-soft or semi-hard. So at room temperature, they will be liquid, but if you put olive oil in the fridge, you may find it somewhat hardened. They can harden a little bit. Polyunsaturated fat, which are the vegetable oils, they have a hell of a lot of arms pointing up, all ready to be connected to hydrogen, oxygen, whatever. Those are the problem molecules because they are not stable. stable molecules would be those that are not electrically charged. I discussed it at the very beginning about magnesium. That is a stable molecule in the form of the powder or the liquid that you're getting in the store. It is stable. It is not going to interact with other things. This is why you can keep your fat in a jar, a metal jar. It's not going to interact with other things. But the moment you put it subject to heat, it is going to start interacting with things, because some of these elements will free on. Uh, um, some require a lot more energy, some require less energy. The problem with polyunsaturated fatty acids is that it requires very little energy for it to immediately become active and bond to all kinds of other things. So vegetable oils are dangerously active and can cause danger in terms of atherosclerosis, because they interact with all kinds of things and they cause a lot of trouble with their interaction, because they modify themselves, modify things around them, and turn them into inflammation and cause damage. So I think precisely 1 o'clock. So I have explained, I think, all your questions. If you have questions more, just ask them in the group and we will answer that. And see you until next time. Bye, everyone.